The winter of 1872 was especially harsh in Crawford County, Ohio. Snow blanketed the rolling farmlands, and through the dense forest surrounding the isolated Lucchese estate, a bitter wind howled. Against the grey horizon, the grand Victorian mansion stood like a sentinel, its windows dark, save for a single flickering light in the east wing. Hunched over his leather-bound journal inside that room was Dr. Thomas Blackwood, his pen scratching frantically across the page. February 17, 1872. I fear I may be the only one who remembers, the only one who truly understands what has happened to the Lucchese family. This account may be my final testimony, should my mind also succumb to the affliction that has claimed 31 souls under this cursed roof. Dr. Blackwood paused, listening to the distant chiming of the grandfather clock in the main hall. Midnight. He dipped his pen and continued, "It began 3 months ago when I was summoned to the Lucchese estate by young Daniel Lucchese, heir to his father's railroad fortune. His letter described a most peculiar ailment afflicting his family, an inability to retain new memories. The journey to the Lucchese estate had been arduous. From Cincinnati, Dr. Blackwood had traveled for 2 days by train, followed by a bone-jarring carriage ride through the snow-laden countryside. As his carriage approached the wrought iron gates of the estate, he was struck by the property's grandeur, a testament to the wealth Antonio Lucchese had amassed since arriving from Italy 20 years prior. The mansion itself was an architectural marvel, a blend of Italian Renaissance and American Victorian styles, with stone gargoyles perched upon the roof's edge. For acres, the grounds stretched, dotted with smaller structures, guest houses, a carriage house, servants' quarters, and a chapel. A high stone wall enclosed the entire property, giving it the appearance of a small, self-contained village. At the door, Daniel Lucchese greeted him, a young man of perhaps 25 with dark circles under his eyes and a nervous disposition that manifested in constant wringing of his hands. "Dr. Blackwood, thank God you've come. I've sent for physicians from Columbus and Cleveland, but none have responded to my telegrams. You're our last hope." Through the grand entrance hall, Dr. Blackwood followed Daniel, noting the opulent furnishings, Venetian chandeliers, Italian marble floors, and wall tapestries depicting scenes from Dante's Inferno. The air inside was stale and carried a faint medicinal scent that the doctor couldn't quite place. "Tell me about this condition," Dr. Blackwood prompted as they ascended the main staircase. "Your letter mentioned memory difficulties." Daniel nodded grimly. "It started with my father, Antonio. 6 months ago, he began to forget conversations we'd had just hours before. We thought little of it. He's 63 and such lapses are not uncommon at his age. But then my mother Sophia began exhibiting the same symptoms. Then my Aunt Maria, my Uncle Paolo, my cousins. One by one, they all began to forget." "Forget what exactly?" "New memories, Doctor. They remember everything before the affliction took hold. Their childhoods, their marriages, the building of this estate, but anything after it vanishes like writing on a slate wiped clean. Every morning they awaken believing it's the same day, October 27, 1871. They reached the second floor landing, and Daniel led him down a long corridor lined with oil paintings of stern-faced Lucy's ancestors. The strangest part is that they can function normally within the moment. They can hold conversations, play piano, even read books. But once their attention shifts or they fall asleep, everything experienced in the interim disappears." Dr. Blackwood frowned. "And this affects 31 people, you say?" "Every single member of my family residing on the estate, every Lucchese by blood or marriage." Daniel paused before a heavy oak door. "Except for me." As Daniel opened the door, Dr. Blackwood was greeted by the sight of an elderly man seated in a wingback chair by the window, staring out at the snow-covered grounds. The man turned, his face lighting up with recognition. "Ah, Daniel, is this the physician from Cincinnati you mentioned at breakfast?" Daniel's expression remained neutral, though Dr. Blackwood detected a flicker of pain in the young man's eyes. "Yes, Father. This is Dr. Thomas Blackwood." Antonio Lucchese rose to his feet with surprising vigor for a man his age. He was tall and lean with a full head of silver hair and a neatly trimmed beard. His tailored suit spoke of wealth and refinement, and his eyes, though clouded with age, maintained a sharp intelligence. "Dr. Blackwood, welcome to our home. I apologize for the urgency of the summons, but we find ourselves in a most unusual predicament." Dr. Blackwood shook the older man's hand. "Mr. Lucchese, your son has briefed me on the situation. I must say, in my 20 years of medical practice, I've never encountered anything quite like this." Antonio gestured toward a seat. "Please sit. I shall explain everything from the beginning." For the next hour, Antonio Lucchese recounted the same story his son had just told. How he had first noticed his memory failing, how the condition had spread throughout the family, and how they had sought medical assistance to no avail. He spoke as if this conversation was happening for the first time, unaware that his son had already related these details to the doctor. When Antonio excused himself to attend to some business correspondence, Dr. Blackwood turned to Daniel. "He seems remarkably composed for someone suffering such a condition." "They all are," Daniel replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "They've adapted to their circumstances without realizing they've done so. Every day I watch them discover their affliction anew, experience the same shock, ask the same questions, devise the same coping strategies. It's as if they're trapped in an endless cycle, living the same day over and over again." Over the course of that first day, Dr. Blackwood was introduced to the entire Lucchese clan. Antonio's wife Sophia, a dignified woman with kind eyes. Antonio's brother Paolo and his wife Maria, who managed the family's financial affairs, their children and grandchildren, cousins who had immigrated from Italy years earlier, and spouses who had married into the family. Each greeted him warmly as if meeting him for the first time, unaware that he had already been introduced to them earlier that day. That evening, the family dinner was a surreal affair. 31 members of the Lucchese family gathered around an enormous oak table in the formal dining room, conversing about the day's events as if everything were normal. They discussed the railroad business, local politics, and preparations for the upcoming Christmas season, seemingly unaware that Christmas had come and gone nearly 2 months prior. Dr. Blackwood observed them carefully, noting the subtle ways Daniel guided the conversation away from temporal inconsistencies. When Antonio mentioned sending a telegraph to President Grant about a railroad matter, Daniel gently reminded him that the president was occupied with reconstruction efforts in the South. When Maria commented on the unseasonably warm weather, Daniel casually mentioned that a cold front had moved in overnight. Each time, the family members accepted these corrections without question, seamlessly incorporating them into their perception of reality. After dinner, Daniel led Dr. Blackwood to a small study adjacent to the library. "This is where I keep my records," he explained, unlocking a roll-top desk to reveal stacks of notebooks. "I've documented everything since the affliction began. Symptoms, behaviors, attempts at treatment." Dr. Blackwood picked up one of the notebooks and flipped through pages of meticulous observations, dates, and times. "This is remarkably thorough. Daniel, have you had medical training?" "No, but I've read extensively on brain physiology. There's a private medical library in Columbus where I've spent many hours researching memory disorders." He pulled out another notebook. "I've tried everything. Herbal remedies, electrical stimulation, hydrotherapy, nothing works. Have you considered the possibility of a shared delusion? Perhaps mass hysteria?" Daniel shook his head firmly. "This is no hysteria, doctor. My family cannot remember. Period. Watch." He pulled a small red marble from his pocket and held it up. "Observe." Daniel left the room briefly, returning with his cousin Isabella, a pretty young woman of perhaps 20. "Isabella, I have something to show you," he said, holding up the red marble. Isabella smiled. "What a lovely marble, Daniel. Is it new?" "Yes, I just acquired it today." He placed it in her palm. "I want you to keep it. Put it in your pocket and remember that I gave it to you." Isabella tucked the marble into her dress pocket. "Of course, I'll remember. Thank you, Daniel. Tell me what color it is." "Red, of course." "And when did I give it to you?" "Just now, silly." She laughed. "Are you playing some sort of game?" Daniel asked her to wait in the corridor for a moment. Once the door closed behind her, he turned to Dr. Blackwood. "Wait." After approximately 5 minutes, Daniel called Isabella back into the room. "Isabella, do you have something in your pocket?" Isabella's brow furrowed as she reached into her pocket, her expression changing to surprise when her fingers closed around the marble. She pulled it out, staring at it with confusion. "How did this get here? Is this yours, Daniel? Don't you remember? I gave it to you just a few minutes ago." Isabella laughed nervously. "You must be mistaken. I would remember if you had given me a marble." "What color is it?" Daniel asked. Isabella looked at the marble in her palm. "It's red, and you have no recollection of our conversation about it. Of me placing it in your hand, of you putting it in your pocket." Isabella's expression faltered, a flicker of fear crossing her face. "Is this some sort of jest?" "Because it isn't amusing, Daniel." After Isabella had been escorted back to the drawing room, Dr. Blackwood sat heavily in a leather armchair. "Fascinating. And you say this happens with all of them? They retain no memories beyond a certain point?" "None. They remember their lives up to October 27th last year. After that, nothing sticks." Daniel's shoulders slumped with exhaustion. "Do you know what today is, Doctor?" "It's my birthday. I turned 25 today. My mother baked my favorite cake this morning, spice cake with apple preserves, just as she does every morning. She's baked the same cake for me 114 times now. And each time, she believes she's baking it for the first time." The weariness in Daniel's voice was palpable, and for the first time, Dr. Blackwood glimpsed the true weight of the burden the young man carried. That night, as Dr. Blackwood settled into the guest chamber prepared for him, he began making notes in his own medical journal. The case was unlike anything he had encountered in medical literature, a family-wide affliction of anterograde amnesia, the inability to form new memories with no apparent physical cause, no head injuries, no fevers, no signs of cerebral inflammation. In the days that followed, Dr. Blackwood conducted thorough examinations of each family member. He checked for signs of infection, tested reflexes, examined pupils, and questioned them extensively about their medical histories. He found nothing physically wrong with any of them. Their minds were sharp, their bodies healthy, save for this one extraordinary deficit. He devised experiments to test the limits of their condition. He found that memories lasted approximately 15 minutes before fading. Emotional reactions to events lingered longer than the memory of the events themselves. If told upsetting news, a family member might forget the news but remain anxious without knowing why. Skills could be taught through repetition. Antonio could learn a new chess move through playing the same scenario dozens of times, but he would have no recollection of having learned it. On his 4th night at the estate, Dr. Blackwood was awakened by a commotion in the hallway. He found Daniel arguing with his father outside the door to the study. "But I must know what's in there," Antonio was saying, his voice tinged with frustration. "This is my house. There should be no locked rooms unknown to me." "Father, we've discussed this. These are just my personal papers. Business matters I'm handling for you." "Business matters? What business matters would require such secrecy?" Antonio's face was flushed with anger. Dr. Blackwood intervened. "Mr. Lucchese, forgive the intrusion. Perhaps I can help explain. Daniel has been assisting me with my research into your family's condition. The documents in that room contain medical information of a sensitive nature." Antonio's expression softened. "Ah, I see. Forgive my outburst, Doctor. I sometimes forget about our situation." He chuckled sadly at his unintentional pun. "It's disorienting to realize that parts of your life are happening without your knowledge or consent." After Antonio had returned to his chambers, Daniel unlocked the study door. "Thank you. This happens almost every night." He becomes suspicious, discovers the locked study, and demands answers. By morning, he'll have forgotten the entire incident. Inside the study, Dr. Blackwood noticed something he had missed during his previous visit. A large map of the estate pinned to the wall with the main house and surrounding buildings drawn in detail. Red X marks were scattered across the map. "What are these markings?" he asked. Daniel hesitated before answering. "Those indicate where family members have wandered off to when not supervised. Paolo was found in the old well house here. Isabella in the chapel crypt here. My mother in the North Woods here." He pointed to each X in turn. They forget they've explored these areas before, so they're drawn to investigate them anew. Some of these places are dangerous, especially in winter. Dr. Blackwood studied the map more closely. There's a structure here beyond the North Woods. It's not marked. Daniel's expression darkened. That's the old quarantine cottage. It was built during the cholera outbreak of '52 before the main house was constructed. No one goes there anymore. There was something in Daniel's tone that gave Dr. Blackwood pause, but before he could inquire further, a blood-curdling scream echoed through the house. They raced down the corridor to find Maria Lucchese standing at the top of the stairs, pointing toward the main hall below. "There's a man down there, a stranger. He was watching me." Daniel hurried to her side. "Aunt Maria, there's no one there. You were sleepwalking again." Dr. Blackwood peered down into the darkened hall. The moonlight streaming through the windows illuminated the space enough to confirm it was empty. Maria clutched Daniel's arm. "I saw him, Daniel, by the grandfather clock. A thin man in dark clothing, just standing there watching the stairs. When he saw me, he smiled." She shuddered. "His teeth." Daniel, his teeth were wrong. Daniel soothed his aunt with practiced ease, guiding her back to her bedroom and assuring her she'd had a nightmare. When he returned to the hallway, his face was grave. "This isn't the first time," he told Dr. Blackwood in a hushed voice. "Several family members have reported seeing the same figure. A thin man with wrong teeth, always near the grandfather clock. I dismissed it as a shared hallucination, perhaps triggered by the memory condition." "But you don't believe that's what it is," Dr. Blackwood observed. Daniel was silent for a long moment. "Follow me." He led Dr. Blackwood to a small door beneath the main staircase, one that might easily be mistaken for a broom closet. Behind it lay a narrow servant staircase leading down to the cellar. Armed with an oil lamp, Daniel descended, motioning for the doctor to follow. The cellar was cavernous with arched brick ceilings and rough stone floors. Wine racks lined one wall and preserved foods were stored on shelves along another, but Daniel led him past these to a heavy iron door at the far end. "This part of the house predates the main structure," Daniel explained as he unlocked the door with a large iron key. "It was the original Lucchese homestead built when my grandfather first settled here in 1830. Beyond the door lay a corridor hewn directly into the bedrock beneath the house. The air was damp and cold, and Dr. Blackwood pulled his dressing gown tighter around himself. "What is this place?" "The original root cellar, but my father repurposed it." Daniel held the lamp higher, illuminating the corridor ahead. "After the war, my father became obsessed with certain ideas. He had served as a medical supplier to the Union Army and witnessed the experimental treatments used on soldiers with head wounds. He became convinced that memory could be manipulated, enhanced, erased, even transferred from one person to another. They passed several small alcoves containing dusty laboratory equipment, glass vessels, copper wiring, batteries, and instruments Dr. Blackwood didn't recognize. He conducted experiments down here with volunteers at first. Veterans with traumatic memories they wanted to forget. Later with others who were less willing." Daniel's voice was hollow. "I discovered all this after the affliction began. Before that, none of us knew about this place. Father kept it locked and forbade anyone from entering." At the end of the corridor, they entered a circular chamber with a high domed ceiling. The walls were lined with shelves containing dozens of glass jars. In each jar floated what appeared to be a small grey organ. "Dear God," Dr. Blackwood whispered, moving closer to examine one. "Are these brain tissue?" Daniel confirmed. "Preserved in some solution of my father's creation. I found his journals." He gestured to a desk in the center of the room covered with leather-bound books. He believed he could extract memories from one brain and implant them in another. He claimed to have succeeded with animals, transferring the memory of a maze from one rat to another. Dr. Blackwood lifted one of the journals with trembling hands and read a passage at random. Subject 7 responded well to electrical stimulation of the left temporal lobe, recounting in detail a childhood memory previously forgotten. Subject 8, receiving the cortical fluid extracted during Subject 7's recollection, subsequently described the same memory as if it were their own. Progress at last. This is monstrous, Dr. Blackwood breathed. These experiments, they're a violation of every medical ethic. Daniel nodded grimly. Now you understand why I couldn't tell you everything in my letters. Why I couldn't seek help from local authorities. My father may have committed terrible crimes in this room. But what does this have to do with the family's current condition? Surely you don't think? I think my father's experiments unleashed something he couldn't control. Daniel picked up another journal, opening to a marked page. His last entry, dated October 26, 1871, the day before everyone's memories stopped. The circle is complete. 31 vessels prepared. The collector comes tonight. Our bargain will be fulfilled, and I shall possess the knowledge of ages. Dr. Blackwood sank into a chair, his mind reeling. Who or what is the collector? I don't know, but look at this. Daniel opened a drawer in the desk and removed a small wooden box. Inside lay a strange device, a copper headband connected to a glass vial by thin silver wires. I found 31 of these, one for each family member. Based on Father's notes, I believe he intended to use these to extract memories from everyone in the family and consolidate them within himself. But something went wrong. Instead of gaining their memories, he and everyone else lost the ability to form new ones. A chill ran down Dr. Blackwood's spine that had nothing to do with the cellar's cold air. And you believe this collector was involved somehow? I believe my father made a deal with something he didn't understand. Something that took more than he offered. Daniel's voice dropped to a whisper. And I believe it's still here in this house. The figure by the grandfather clock. Dr. Blackwood wanted to dismiss Daniel's theory as the product of an overwrought mind. But the evidence before him, the laboratory, the journals, the preserved brain tissue, suggested a horrifying possibility that Antonio Lucchese had indeed meddled with forces beyond human comprehension. We should leave this place, Dr. Blackwood said, suddenly anxious to return to the relative safety of the upper floors. As they made their way back through the underground corridor, Dr. Blackwood couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The shadows seemed to move in the corners of his vision, and the flame of Daniel's lamp flickered despite the absence of any draft. That night, sleep eluded Dr. Blackwood. He lay awake, listening to the sounds of the old house, the settling of timbers, the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall below, the occasional footsteps of a family member wandering the corridors, lost in the endless present that was their existence. And just before dawn, he heard it. A soft, rhythmic tapping at his door. 3 taps, pause, 3 taps, pause. Who's there? He called, reaching for the lamp on his bedside table. No response came. Only the continuing pattern. 3 taps, pause, 3 taps. Dr. Blackwood rose and cautiously approached the door. Daniel, is that you? Still no answer. Heart pounding, he turned the key in the lock and pulled the door open a crack. The hallway was empty and dark, save for the pale glow of moonlight through a distant window. He was about to close the door when he noticed something on the floor, a small red marble identical to the one Daniel had given Isabella during their demonstration. As Dr. Blackwood bent to pick it up, he glimpsed a movement at the end of the corridor. A thin silhouette gliding silently toward the stairs. The next morning at breakfast, the routine that Daniel had described played out exactly as predicted. Each family member greeted Dr. Blackwood as if meeting him for the first time. Sophia baked Daniel's birthday cake again. Antonio discussed the previous day's newspaper as if it were current. The illusion of normalcy was maintained through Daniel's careful management of conversations and gentle redirections. After breakfast, Dr. Blackwood sought out Daniel in the study. I need to know more about this collector your father mentioned, and I need to know about the quarantine cottage. Daniel looked up from his notebooks, surprise evident on his face. Why the sudden interest in the cottage? Dr. Blackwood described the tapping at his door, the red marble, and the figure he'd glimpsed in the hallway. I believe whatever is happening in this house is connected to that building. Your father's journals mentioned 31 vessels, and there are 31 afflicted family members. What if the cottage is where it all began? Daniel was silent for a long moment, conflict evident in his expression. Finally, he sighed. Very well. I'll take you there. But I must warn you, it's not a pleasant place. They set out after lunch, bundled against the February cold. The snow had stopped, but the temperature remained well below freezing, their breath forming clouds in the crisp air. They followed a narrow path through the north woods, the bare branches of oak and maple trees forming a skeletal canopy above them. My grandfather built the cottage during the cholera epidemic, Daniel explained as they walked. The disease never reached our family, but he was cautious. Any visitor showing symptoms was quarantined there. Later during the war, my father used it to treat wounded soldiers who couldn't be moved to proper hospitals. After 20 minutes of walking, they emerged from the trees into a small clearing. In the center stood a modest two-story structure of weathered stone and timber. Unlike the grand mansion, the cottage was utilitarian in design with small windows and a steep roof now laden with snow. A crooked chimney rose from one end, though no smoke emerged from it. No one has lived here for years, Daniel said as they approached. The servants refused to come near it. They say it's haunted. Dr. Blackwood followed Daniel up the icy steps to the front door. The wood was swollen with moisture, and Daniel had to put his shoulder into it to force it open. Inside, the air was stale and frigid, carrying a faint medicinal scent similar to what Dr. Blackwood had noticed in the main house, but stronger here, more pungent. The ground floor consisted of a single large room that had clearly served as a ward. 6 iron bed frames stood in a row against one wall, their mattresses long gone. A scarred wooden table dominated the center of the room, surrounded by chairs. Shelves lined the walls, still stocked with dusty bottles of medicines and supplies. This is where my father treated the soldiers, Daniel said, his voice echoing in the empty space. But it's not what I brought you to see. He led Dr. Blackwood to a trapdoor in the floor near the rear of the cottage. Before the war, this led to a root cellar. My father converted it like he did with the space beneath the main house. The trapdoor opened to reveal a steep staircase descending into darkness. Daniel lit a lantern he had brought from the house and went down first, holding it high to illuminate the way. The cellar was much smaller than the laboratory beneath the mansion, but equipped in a similar fashion. Glass vessels and copper wiring covered a long workbench. Leather straps hung from hooks on the wall, and in the center of the room stood a curious apparatus, a chair with restraints, surrounded by a circular arrangement of 31 smaller chairs. This is where it happened, Daniel said quietly. According to my father's journals, on the night of October 26th, he gathered the entire family here. He told them he was conducting a scientific demonstration, that he would show them a new technique for improving memory. They trusted him. They had no reason not to. Dr. Blackwood approached the central chair, noticing the intricate copper wiring connecting it to the smaller chairs in the circle. He connected them all to this device. Daniel nodded. The copper headbands I showed you in the main laboratory. Each person wore one. Father sat in the central chair, which he called the collector's throne. He believed the device would channel the family's memories into him, giving him access to their combined knowledge and experiences. But instead, it did the opposite. It trapped them all in the past. Yes, but not quite in the way you might think. Daniel moved to a small desk in the corner and retrieved a leather-bound book, another of Antonio's journals. My father's final entries describe what he intended to happen that night. He had learned of an entity, the collector, that existed outside normal time and space. An entity that fed on human memories. That's preposterous, Dr. Blackwood objected. Memory isn't something that can be consumed. Is it any more preposterous than 31 people simultaneously losing their ability to form new memories? Daniel countered. My father believed that by offering the collector access to our family's memories, he could bargain for knowledge beyond human understanding. The device was meant to serve as a conduit, allowing the collector to sample our memories while channeling ancient knowledge into my father's mind. Dr. Blackwood circled the arrangement of chairs, trying to make sense of what he was hearing. If what you're saying is true, why weren't you affected? You're a Lucchese by blood. Daniel's expression darkened. I wasn't here that night. Father and I had quarreled the day before. I had discovered some of his earlier experiments and threatened to expose him. He drugged me, laudanum in my evening tea. I woke the next morning in my bed with no memory of how I got there. By then it was already too late. The family was changed. And you believe this collector is still here, still feeding on your family's memories? I believe it never left. Every night at midnight, the grandfather clock in the main hall chimes 13 times instead of 12. Every night, family members report seeing the thin figure watching the stairs. And every day they wake up believing it's October 27, 1871. Daniel's voice cracked with emotion. They're trapped in an endless loop, Doctor, and I fear the collector is keeping them there, feeding on the same day's experiences over and over again. Dr. Blackwood was about to respond when a sound from above froze them both. The creak of a floorboard. Someone was moving in the cottage above them. Daniel extinguished the lantern, plunging them into darkness. They stood in tense silence, listening as footsteps crossed the floor overhead, slow and deliberate. Could it be one of the family? Dr. Blackwood whispered. Impossible. They're all at the main house, and none would venture this far alone. The footsteps stopped directly above the trap door. For several long seconds, nothing happened. Then, 3 distinct knocks sounded on the wooden door above them. Pause. 3 more knocks. Dr. Blackwood felt a cold sweat break out across his forehead. It was the same pattern he had heard at his bedroom door the night before. The trapdoor handle turned slowly and a thin sliver of light appeared as it began to open. Daniel grabbed Dr. Blackwood's arm and pulled him toward a narrow doorway half hidden behind the workbench. This way, quickly! They slipped through the doorway into a cramped tunnel that sloped upward. Daniel led the way, one hand against the rough stone wall for guidance. Behind them, Dr. Blackwood heard the trap door open fully, followed by the sound of something heavy descending the stairs. Footsteps too slow, too measured to be human. The tunnel eventually emerged in a small cave in the hillside beyond the cottage. They scrambled out into the winter afternoon, the cold air a shock after the close confines of the tunnel. My father built escape routes beneath all the buildings on the estate, Daniel explained as they hurried back toward the main house. A precaution from his war days. He feared Confederate agents might come for his medical supplies. Dr. Blackwood glanced back toward the cottage, half expecting to see some ghastly figure pursuing them, but the woods behind them were empty, silent, save for the occasional creak of branches in the wind. What was that thing, Daniel? What did your father summon? I don't know exactly. His journals speak of it in riddles and metaphors. The keeper of lost things. The one who remembers. The collector of moments. Daniel shook his head. But whatever it is, it's bound to our family now, bound to this estate. By the time they reached the mansion, the short winter day was already fading toward dusk. The family had gathered in the drawing room for their daily ritual of music and conversation, a scene that Daniel had told Dr. Blackwood repeated identically each evening. Antonio sat at the piano playing a Chopin nocturne from memory while Sophia embroidered by the firelight. Paolo and Maria played chess near the window. The children sat on the floor engaged in a game of jacks. It was a tableau of perfect domestic tranquility, if one ignored the fact that none of them remembered yesterday or conceived of tomorrow. Daniel and Dr. Blackwood watched from the doorway, unnoticed by the family absorbed in their activities. They seem content, Dr. Blackwood observed quietly. They are, in their way. They experience joy, sadness, love, all the emotions of life. They just cannot accumulate experiences beyond a single day. Daniel's voice held no bitterness, only a profound sadness. Sometimes I wonder if they're better off. They never grow bored with their favorite songs or books. They never tire of each other's company. Each sunset is as beautiful to them as if it were the first they'd ever seen. Dr. Blackwood considered this philosophical perspective. But they also cannot grow or change, cannot learn from mistakes or build on achievements. No. They're frozen in time while I age around them. Daniel turned away from the peaceful scene. Come, there's something else I need to show you. He led Dr. Blackwood back to the study and unlocked a cabinet behind the desk. From it, he withdrew a small wooden case similar to the one that had contained the copper headband in the underground laboratory. But when he opened this one, it revealed not a copper device, but a small glass vial filled with silvery liquid. What is that? Dr. Blackwood asked. According to my father's notes, it's what he called memory essence, the distilled experiences of a human mind. Daniel held the vial up to the lamplight where the liquid seemed to shimmer and move of its own accord. He extracted it from one of his subjects before the final experiment. I believe it may be the key to understanding what happened to my family. You think this substance contains actual memories? That's impossible. 6 months ago, I would have agreed with you. Now. Daniel set the vial down carefully. I've been studying Father's work, trying to decipher his methods. I believe he found a way to separate memory from the physical brain, to extract it as this essence and later reintroduce it to another host. Dr. Blackwood frowned. Even if such a thing were possible, which defies all medical science, what good would this single vial do? It couldn't restore memories to 31 people. No. But it might help us understand the nature of the collector. If we could analyze this substance, perhaps we could find a way to break its hold on my family. Before Dr. Blackwood could respond, the clock in the hallway began to chime. They both counted the strokes. 10, 11, 12. A 13th chime sounded, deeper and more resonant than the others. Daniel's face paled. It's starting. Every night at this hour, the collector begins its rounds. As if summoned by his words, a cold draft swept through the study, causing the lamp flame to flicker wildly. The temperature in the room plummeted, and Dr. Blackwood could see his breath forming clouds in the suddenly frigid air. We need to get back to my family, Daniel said urgently, pocketing the vial of memory essence. They're vulnerable during this hour. They hurried back to the drawing room, but when they arrived, they found it empty. The piano bench was overturned, the embroidery hoop abandoned on Sophia's chair, the chess pieces scattered across the floor. Where are they? Dr. Blackwood asked, alarmed by the signs of hasty departure. Daniel moved quickly to the bell pull and rang for a servant. A maid appeared moments later, her face ashen. Where is the family, Martha? Daniel demanded. The old man came, Mr. Daniel, the one with the wrong teeth. He stood in the doorway and beckoned, and they followed him, every one of them. They went toward the north woods. The quarantine cottage, Daniel breathed. He's taking them back to where it began. Without waiting for Dr. Blackwood, Daniel raced from the room. The doctor hesitated only briefly before following, pausing just long enough to grab his medical bag from the hall table. Whatever they were about to face, he suspected his skills might be needed. Outside, the night was clear and bitterly cold, the moon casting the snow-covered landscape in silver light. Daniel had already mounted a horse from the stables and was holding the reins of another. We'll never catch them on foot, he explained as Dr. Blackwood awkwardly mounted the second horse. The collector moves faster than any human. They galloped through the estate grounds and into the north woods, following the path they had taken earlier that day. Fresh footprints in the snow confirmed their fears. The entire Lucchese family was indeed heading toward the quarantine cottage. When they reached the clearing, the cottage stood dark and silent. No light showed in the windows, no smoke from the chimney despite the bitter cold. But the front door stood wide open, and footprints led inside. We're too late, Daniel said, dismounting and drawing a revolver from his coat pocket. He's already gathered them. Dr. Blackwood eyed the weapon with alarm. What do you intend to do with that? Whatever I must to free my family, Daniel's face was set in grim determination. Stay here if you wish, Doctor. What happens next may test the limits of your scientific understanding. But Dr. Blackwood had come too far to turn back now. I'll come with you. Two may stand a better chance than one against whatever awaits us. They approached the cottage cautiously, weapons raised. Dr. Blackwood had drawn his own revolver from his medical bag. As a doctor who often traveled to remote locations, he had learned the necessity of self-protection, though he had never imagined using his weapon against something potentially supernatural. The ground floor of the cottage was empty, but the trap door to the cellar stood open, warm light spilling up from below. The same medicinal scent Dr. Blackwood had noticed earlier was now overpowering, mixed with an acrid smell like burning metal. They descended the stairs slowly, Daniel leading the way. The scene that greeted them in the cellar was straight out of a nightmare. The 31 members of the Lucchese family sat in the circle of chairs, each wearing one of the copper headbands Daniel had shown Dr. Blackwood in the underground laboratory. Their eyes were open but vacant, staring into nothing. Silver wires connected each headband to the central chair, the collector's throne, where a figure sat with its back to the entrance. It was tall and thin, draped in what appeared to be a black cloak. As they watched, it raised long skeletal hands and adjusted something on its own head, a crown-like apparatus more elaborate than the headbands worn by the family. "Stop!" Daniel called out, his voice echoing in the chamber. "Release them!" The figure in the chair didn't turn, but a voice responded, a dry, papery whisper that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. The bargain was sealed with blood, young Lucchese. 31 vessels offered freely. 31 minds to sustain me. They didn't offer themselves freely. My father deceived them. Yet here they sit, night after night, returning to feed me their experiences. Sweet memories, fresh and new each day, despite being the same. The figure made a sound like dry leaves rustling. A laugh perhaps. Your father sought knowledge beyond his grasp. I granted his wish in my fashion. Now each night they remember, and I collect. Dr. Blackwood stepped forward, driven by medical curiosity despite his fear. What are you doing to them? The figure finally turned and Dr. Blackwood recoiled at the sight. The face beneath the hood was gaunt, almost skeletal, with papery skin stretched tight over prominent bones. But it was the mouth that inspired true horror. Where teeth should have been, tiny glass vials filled with swirling silver liquid were embedded in the gums, giving the appearance of a grotesque, glittering grin. I harvest what they create, the collector said. Each day they live, each night I feed. The bargain sustains us both. Daniel raised his revolver. The bargain ends tonight. Let them go or I'll destroy your vessel. The collector's lipless mouth stretched in a terrible smile. You cannot destroy what exists between moments, child. I am not confined to this form. And should you try, it gestured toward Antonio, seated closest to the throne. A thin stream of silver began to flow from the old man's headband through the connecting wire. Antonio's body stiffened, his vacant expression twisting into one of pain. Stop! Daniel lowered his weapon. Don't hurt him. The silver flow ceased, and Antonio slumped in his chair, breathing heavily, but apparently unharmed. What do you want? Dr. Blackwood asked the creature. Surely there must be some accommodation we can reach. The collector tilted its head, regarding the doctor with empty eye sockets in which tiny points of light seemed to float like distant stars. I want what all collectors want, physician. To complete my collection. It pointed a long bony finger at Daniel. One vessel remains unclaimed. One mind eludes me. Daniel took an involuntary step back. You want me? The circle must be complete. 32 Lucchese minds gathered in one place. That was the bargain your father struck, his family's memories in exchange for cosmic knowledge. But you escaped, and the circuit remained open. Incomplete. The collector rose from the throne, its movements jerky and unnatural. Join your family, Daniel Lucchese. Take your place in the circle and I will release them all. Dr. Blackwood grabbed Daniel's arm. Don't listen to it. Creatures like this deal in lies and half-truths. But Daniel was staring at his family, at his father, his mother, his aunts and uncles, his cousins, all trapped in an endless cycle of forgetting. If I refuse, then they remain as they are, forever caught between moments, forever feeding me the same day's experiences until their bodies fail and their minds join my collection permanently. Dr. Blackwood could see Daniel wavering, tempted by the promise of his family's freedom. "Wait," he said, an idea forming. "You said you collect memories. What about this?" He reached into Daniel's coat pocket and withdrew the vial of memory essence they had brought from the main house. "Would this satisfy your need? Could this complete your collection in Daniel's place?" The collector's attention fixed on the vial, the points of light in its eye sockets flaring brighter. "Where did you get that?" For the first time, its papery voice held an emotion Dr. Blackwood could identify. "Greed. From my father's laboratory," Daniel said, catching on to Dr. Blackwood's strategy. "It's the distilled essence of memories. Decades of experiences concentrated into pure form, far more potent than anything you could extract from me in a lifetime." The collector drifted closer, bony hand outstretched toward the vial. "Give it to me." "First, release my family," Daniel demanded. "All of them?" The creature hesitated, its skeletal head tilting as if considering the bargain. Then it moved back to the throne and placed its hands on a series of copper dials embedded in the armrests. "The circuit will be broken, but be warned. What has been taken cannot be returned. They will remain as they are, frozen in time." "What do you mean?" Dr. Blackwood asked. "You said you would release them from the nightly feeding." "Yes. But the memories I have already consumed cannot be restored. Their minds will remain as they are, unable to form new memories beyond October 27, 1871. Daniel's face fell. "Then what's the point?" "They'll still be trapped, but they will be free of me," the collector countered. "Free to live each day anew without my interference. And in time, perhaps." It gestured toward the vial Dr. Blackwood held. "Such essence might be used to restore what was lost, if one knew how to administer it properly." Dr. Blackwood and Daniel exchanged a glance, a silent communication passing between them. If they could break the collector's hold on the family, perhaps Antonio's research, combined with Dr. Blackwood's medical knowledge, might eventually lead to a cure for their condition. "Do it," Daniel said finally. "Release them." The collector twisted the copper dials on the throne. Around the circle, the Lucchese family members gasped in unison, their vacant expressions suddenly clearing. They looked around in confusion, taking in their surroundings as if seeing them for the first time. "Daniel," Sophia called out, spotting her son. "What's happening? Where are we?" Before Daniel could respond, the collector rose from the throne and glided toward Dr. Blackwood, skeletal hand still outstretched. "The essence. Our bargain is fulfilled." Dr. Blackwood hesitated, suddenly uncertain. The vial in his hand might indeed hold the key to restoring the Lucchese family's memories. To surrender it to this creature might condemn them to their condition permanently. But as the family members began removing their copper headbands, their confusion mounting, Dr. Blackwood realized they had little choice. The collector had released its direct hold on them, but it remained a threat so long as it stayed in this world. "Take it," he said, holding out the vial. "And then leave this family in peace." The collector snatched the vial with surprising speed, cradling it in its bony hands like a precious jewel. "Exquisite," it whispered, holding the vial up to examine the swirling silver liquid inside. "The experiences of a lifetime distilled to their essence." It uncorked the vial and tilted its head back, opening its grotesque mouth lined with glass teeth. As the silver liquid poured between its lips, a change came over the creature. Its form seemed to shimmer and blur, becoming less solid with each passing moment. "What's happening to it?" Daniel asked, helping his mother to her feet. Dr. Blackwood watched in fascination as the collector's body began to dissolve, turning translucent like morning mist. "I believe the essence was too potent, too concentrated. It's overwhelming the creature's form. The collector made no sound as it faded, but its eye sockets fixed on Daniel with what might have been anger or perhaps respect. The last to disappear was its terrible glass-toothed grin, hanging in the air like the smile of a Cheshire cat before it, too, dissolved into nothingness. In the days that followed, the Lucchese family struggled to understand their condition. As the collector had warned, they remained unable to form new memories beyond October 27, 1871. Each morning, they awoke believing it was the same autumn day, with no recollection of the intervening months. But there were differences. Without the collector's influence, they no longer experienced the nightly summons to the quarantine cottage. The grandfather clock no longer chimed 13 times at midnight. And most importantly, they were now truly free to live each day as it came, even if they couldn't remember it afterward. Daniel and Dr. Blackwood established new routines to help the family cope with their condition. Journals were placed beside each bed, explaining the situation anew each morning. Servants were trained to guide family members through daily activities with patience and understanding. The quarantine cottage was boarded up and the underground laboratory beneath the main house was sealed forever. Dr. Blackwood remained at the estate, his medical curiosity and sense of responsibility compelling him to stay and study this unprecedented case. He and Daniel spent long hours poring over Antonio's research, seeking clues that might lead to a treatment for the family's condition. One evening, as they sat in the study reviewing their notes, Daniel posed a question that had clearly been troubling him. "Do you think we did the right thing, Doctor? Accepting that their condition might be permanent?" Dr. Blackwood considered his answer carefully. "I believe we did the only thing possible under the circumstances. The collector was feeding on them, using them. Now at least they are free of its influence. But are they truly living? Experiencing the same day over and over, never building new memories. They experience joy, sorrow, love, frustration, all the emotions that make us human. The fact that they don't remember doesn't make those experiences less real." Dr. Blackwood closed the journal he had been reading. "And who knows, perhaps in time we'll find a way to restore what they've lost." Daniel nodded, though doubt lingered in his eyes. "There's something I haven't told you. Something I discovered in Father's final journal." He withdrew a small key from his pocket. "This opens a compartment in his desk at the quarantine cottage, a compartment I haven't dared to open until now." They returned to the boarded-up cottage the next day, forcing entry through a window since the doors had been nailed shut. The desk Daniel had mentioned stood in a corner of the ground floor, covered in dust, but otherwise undisturbed. The key fit a small lock in the bottom drawer. Inside they found a leather case containing 31 tiny glass vials, each filled with the same silvery liquid as the one they had given the collector. Each vial was labeled with a name: Antonio, Sophia, Paolo, Maria, and all the others. Memory essence, Daniel breathed. Extracted from each family member before the experiment. Dr. Blackwood carefully examined one of the vials. "Your father must have taken these as a precaution. Insurance in case his experiment went awry. Can they be restored? Can we give these back to my family? I don't know." Antonio's notes mentioned the possibility, but the procedure would be experimental at best, dangerous at worst. Dr. Blackwood replaced the vial in the case. "It would require rebuilding the apparatus your father designed, understanding how it works, and testing it thoroughly before attempting to use it on your family. How long would that take? Years, perhaps. And there's no guarantee of success." Daniel closed the case and locked it again. "Then we have our work cut out for us, Doctor. Years of research ahead." "Indeed, we do. But consider this, Daniel. Your family experiences each day fresh, with no burden of past sorrows or future anxieties. They live entirely in the present moment. Some philosophers would consider that a form of enlightenment." They left the cottage and walked back toward the main house where lights shone warmly in the windows against the gathering dusk. Inside, the Lucchese family would be preparing for dinner, engaging in their evening rituals, unaware that tomorrow would be identical to today in their perception. Yet, as Dr. Blackwood had observed, they found joy in each moment, approaching every conversation, every meal, every sunset as if experiencing it for the first time. Their condition, while tragic in many ways, had granted them a unique perspective on existence, a perpetual appreciation for the present that most people, burdened by memories and anticipations, could never achieve. Daniel paused at the edge of the woods, looking back at the darkened cottage. "Do you think the collector is truly gone?" Dr. Blackwood followed his gaze. "I believe it has moved on to other hunting grounds. The essence we gave it was powerful, perhaps powerful enough to sustain it for decades. By the time it hungers again, we'll be prepared." As they continued toward the house, the last light of day faded from the western sky. Behind them, a shadow seemed to detach itself from the deeper darkness around the cottage. A thin figure that stood watching them for a long moment before dissolving into the gathering night. Inside the Lucchese mansion, the grandfather clock in the main hall chimed 8 times, its mechanism repaired to count the hours correctly. The family gathered in the drawing room, Antonio at the piano playing Chopin, Sophia with her embroidery, the others engaged in games and conversation. Their faces were peaceful, unmarked by the weight of remembrance or the anxiety of anticipation. They lived in an eternal present. 31 souls caught between moments, neither fully in this world nor beyond it. And in his study, Dr. Blackwood opened a fresh page in his journal and began to write. February 17, 1872. "I fear I may be the only one who remembers, the only one who truly understands what has happened to the Lucchese family. This account may be my final testimony, should my mind also succumb to the affliction that has claimed 31 souls under this cursed roof. But for now, I remember. For now, I bear witness, and perhaps in time, we will find a way to break the circle and set them free." In the silence of the night, somewhere in the vast Lucchese estate, 3 soft taps sounded. Pause. 3 more taps. The collector of memories was patient. It could wait. After all, it existed between moments, outside the flow of time as humans understood it. And one day, when the circle was finally complete, it would return to claim what had been promised. 31 vessels filled. 1 remaining. The bargain would be fulfilled.